Across 700 years of history, 5 brilliant minds were connected by an invisible thread. There's something historians don't want you to know. Not because they're hiding it, but because it's so strange, so impossible, that most people wouldn't believe it. Some of history's most brilliant minds, people separated by centuries, continents, and cultures, were connected in ways that defy explanation. They shared knowledge that shouldn't have existed. They possessed objects that had traveled impossible distances. They influenced each other across time itself. I've spent months following a trail of clues that most researchers ignore. Because the greatest minds in human civilization weren't working alone. They were part of something bigger. I'm about to show you evidence that will make you question everything you thought you knew about how knowledge travels through time. Real artifacts, real people, real connections that seem absolutely impossible. Our journey begins with a discovery that shocked the academic world. In 1912, in a dusty villa outside Rome, a man found something that would puzzle the greatest minds for over a century. Something that would become the first thread in unraveling a mystery that spans the ages. Picture this. Wilfred Voynich, a revolutionary turned rare book dealer, is examining a collection of manuscripts that the Jesuit order is secretly selling. Among the dusty tomes, he finds something that makes his hands tremble. A book unlike anything he's ever seen. 240 pages of text written in a script that doesn't match any known language. Bizarre illustrations of plants that don't exist, astronomical charts that make no sense, and women swimming through impossible tubes and chambers. This is the Voynich Manuscript, and it's about to reveal a network of connections that spans 5 centuries. But here's where our story gets interesting. This wasn't just any old book. Voynich discovered a letter tucked inside, written in 1666 by Johannes Marcus Marci, a Bohemian physician. The letter revealed that this mysterious manuscript had once belonged to Emperor Rudolph II of the Holy Roman Empire, who had paid 600 gold ducats for it, a fortune in today's money. But Rudolph II didn't just collect books. He collected people. His court in Prague was a magnet for the most brilliant and mysterious minds of the 16th century. Alchemists, astrologers, inventors, and scholars from across Europe flocked to his castle, creating what historians now call the most intellectually vibrant court in European history. And among these brilliant minds was a man whose story seems too incredible to be true. An Englishman named John Dee, who served as court astrologer to Queen Elizabeth I before making his way to Rudolph's court. Dee wasn't just any scholar. He was a mathematician, astronomer, and occultist who claimed he could communicate with angels. Now, here's where the connections start to get eerie. John Dee owned multiple manuscripts attributed to Roger Bacon, the 13th century friar and early scientist. And according to historical records, Dee had exactly 630 ducats in October 1586, almost exactly the amount Rudolph II paid for the Voynich manuscript. But the most chilling detail? Dee's own son wrote that his father owned a book containing nothing but hieroglyphics, which book his father bestowed much time upon. The Voynich manuscript. It had to be, but here's what makes this connection even more extraordinary. Dee believed that knowledge could be transmitted across vast distances without physical contact, what he called action at a distance. He claimed that through his angelic communications, he could influence events in distant lands and receive information from sources thousands of miles away. This wasn't just mystical thinking. Dee was also a serious mathematician and scientist who advised on navigation and cartography. His concept of action at a distance would later become a fundamental principle in physics. The idea that objects can influence each other without direct physical contact. The answer lies in understanding who John Dee really was and the mysterious object he used to communicate with what he believed were divine beings. An object that connects our story to a civilization that existed thousands of years before Dee was even born. John Dee was no ordinary scholar. To Queen Elizabeth I, he was my philosopher, a trusted advisor who helped plan England's naval strategies and even chose the most auspicious date for her coronation. But to those who knew him intimately, Dee was something far more mysterious. In his private study, away from the prying eyes of the court, Dee would spend hours gazing into a black mirror, claiming to receive messages from angels who revealed the secrets of the universe. This wasn't just any mirror. It was a perfectly polished disc of volcanic glass, dark as midnight and smooth as silk. For centuries, scholars assumed this mirror was European in origin. But in 2021, scientists made a discovery that sent shockwaves through the archaeological community. Using advanced chemical analysis, they determined that D's angel mirror was made from obsidian that came from Mexico. This wasn't just any Mexican obsidian. It was specifically from the Pachuca region, the same area where Aztec priests crafted sacred mirrors for their most important religious ceremonies. The same mirrors they used to communicate with their gods. Think about this for a moment. Somewhere in the mountains of Mexico, centuries before Columbus ever set sail, an Aztec craftsman carefully shaped this volcanic glass into a perfect mirror. It was used in sacred rituals, perhaps to divine the future or communicate with the spirit world. Then, through a chain of events we can only imagine, it made its way across an ocean to the hands of an English scholar who used it for the exact same purpose. But here's what makes this connection even more extraordinary. He didn't just use the mirror randomly. He had a specific partner in his angelic communications, a man named Edward Kelly, who claimed to see and hear the angels that D could only sense. Together, they developed what they called the Enochian language, a supposed angelic script that bears striking similarities to the undecipherable text in the Voynich Manuscript. Two mysterious scripts, two methods of divine communication, two men connected to the same imperial court. Coincidence or something more? But our web of connections is just beginning to reveal itself. Because the court of Rudolph II attracted another figure whose story is so impossible that historians still debate whether he was a genius, a charlatan, or something else entirely. A man who claimed to have lived for over 300 years and who would go on to influence some of the most powerful people in European history. His real name remains unknown. His origins are a mystery. But for over 70 years, a man calling himself the Count of Saint-Germain moved through European high society like a ghost, leaving behind a trail of influence that connected some of history's most powerful figures. Picture a man who never aged, who spoke 10 languages fluently, who could paint masterpieces and compose music that moved audiences to tears. A man who claimed to remember conversations with historical figures from centuries past, who never ate or drank in public, and who possessed wealth that seemed to have no source. But Saint-Germain wasn't just a curiosity. He was a kingmaker. When Catherine the Great needed help securing her position as Empress of Russia, Saint-Germain was there. When Louis XV of France faced diplomatic crises, he turned to this mysterious count for advice. Saint-Germain was the only person, aside from the king himself, allowed into the private chambers of Madame de Pompadour. Now, here's where our story takes a fascinating turn. Saint-Germain claimed to be an alchemist, part of the same tradition that included Roger Bacon, John Dee, and the mysterious author of the Voynich Manuscript. He spoke of possessing an elixir that had kept him alive for centuries, and he demonstrated knowledge of metallurgy and chemistry that seemed impossible for his time. But Saint-Germain's most remarkable claim was his ability to influence events across vast distances. Like John Dee before him, he believed in what alchemists called action at a distance, the power to effect change in remote locations through will and knowledge alone. Witnesses reported that Saint-Germain would predict political events in distant countries with uncanny accuracy, as if he had sources of information that transcended normal communication. He claimed to have been present at historical events spanning centuries, describing conversations with long-dead figures in vivid detail. When challenged about the impossibility of such claims, Saint-Germain would demonstrate his knowledge of metallurgy by transmuting base metals, a process that seemed to violate the known laws of chemistry. But Saint-Germain's most intriguing connection wasn't to royalty. It was to another mysterious figure who lived centuries earlier. Nicolas Flamel, a 14th century French scribe who, according to legend, had discovered the secret of the Philosopher's Stone. Nicolas Flamel was a real person, a successful book dealer and scribe who lived in Paris from around 1330 to 1418. But according to alchemical tradition, Flamel achieved something that countless others had failed to do. He successfully transmuted base metals into gold and created an elixir of life. The story goes that Flamel acquired a mysterious book, a 21-page manuscript written by Abraham the Jew, filled with cryptic symbols and alchemical formulas. After years of study, Flamel supposedly decoded its secrets and achieved immortality alongside his wife, Perenelle. Here's what's fascinating. Saint-Germain claimed to have known Flamel personally. He spoke of the medieval alchemist as if they had been colleagues, sharing details about Flamel's work that weren't recorded in any historical documents. When pressed about how this was possible, Saint-Germain would simply smile and change the subject. But the connections don't stop there. Both Flamel and Saint-Germain were associated with the Rosicrucian movement, a secret society that claimed to possess ancient wisdom about the nature of reality. The same movement that influenced John Dee's work, and that may have inspired the mysterious symbols in the Voynich Manuscript. Think about what we're seeing here. Across centuries, we have a network of individuals connected by shared knowledge, mysterious artifacts, and claims of supernatural abilities. They're all seeking the same thing: the secrets of life, death, and the nature of reality itself. But this network didn't end with Saint-Germain's death in 1784. In fact, some of the most shocking connections in our story involve figures from the modern era. Inventors and visionaries whose rivalry may have been influenced by the same ancient knowledge that connected their predecessors. The year is 1884. A young Serbian inventor named Nikola Tesla arrives in New York City with little more than the clothes on his back and a letter of introduction to Thomas Edison. What happens next would create one of history's most famous rivalries, but also reveal connections to the ancient network of knowledge we've been following. But here's what makes this connection even more extraordinary. Living alone in New York hotel room, Tesla claimed to be in contact with beings from other worlds who were guiding his research. He spoke of receiving detailed technical information through these communications, information that he said would revolutionize human civilization. Sound familiar? It's the same claim made by John Dee centuries earlier, when he used his Aztec mirror to receive what he believed were angelic messages containing divine knowledge. Both men claimed to receive technical information from non-human intelligences. Both used geometric symbols as part of their communication methods. Both believed they were accessing ancient knowledge that had been hidden from humanity. In Tesla's personal laboratory notes, discovered decades after his death, researchers found detailed studies of what he called resonance patterns, specific geometric forms that he believed could create sympathetic vibrations across vast distances. These patterns were virtually identical to symbols found throughout the Voynich Manuscript, particularly in the astronomical and cosmological sections. Tesla had somehow independently arrived at the same symbolic language that had been used by alchemists for centuries. He was studying the same geometric principles that fascinated John Dee, the same concepts of action at a distance that Saint-Germain claimed to master. But Tesla was approaching it from the perspective of electromagnetic theory and wireless transmission. And Edison? His spirit phone project wasn't just a late-life curiosity. Edison had been studying what he called life units, microscopic entities that he believed carried consciousness and could exist independently of the physical body. This concept was remarkably similar to the alchemical belief in the subtle body that could transcend physical death, the same belief that convinced Saint-Germain he could live forever. In Edison's private laboratory notes, researchers discovered that he had been experimenting with what he called etheric vibrations, frequencies that he believed could bridge the gap between the physical and spiritual worlds. These experiments used geometric patterns and symbolic arrangements that were strikingly similar to those found in John Dee's angelic communications and the mysterious diagrams of the Voynich Manuscript. Most remarkably, both Edison and Tesla were working on the same fundamental problem that had obsessed alchemists for centuries: how to transmit information and energy across space without physical connection. Both were essentially trying to achieve what John Dee called action at a distance, the ability to influence and communicate across the void. What we're seeing is a pattern that spans over 700 years. From Roger Bacon to Nicolas Flamel, from John Dee to Saint-Germain, from Tesla to Edison. Brilliant minds seeking to transcend the limitations of physical reality, connected by shared artifacts, similar methods, and the same fundamental questions about the nature of existence. But this raises the ultimate question. Is this all just coincidence? Or is there something deeper at work here? A genuine thread of knowledge that has been passed down through the centuries, connecting history's greatest minds in ways we're only now beginning to understand?